Okay, so India has this absolutely massive ambition to transform its economy into a $30 trillion powerhouse. But to fuel a dream that big, you need one heck of an engine to make it all happen. And for India, that engine is its banking sector. So let's break down exactly what's standing in the way. The official name for this goal is Viksit Bharat 2047, which, just means Developed India 2047. Now, this is way more than just a catchy slogan. It's a concrete economic vision. The stakes could not be higher, and the banks are right at the very center of this mission. I mean, they're responsible for over half of the economy's credit. But there's a problem, a single number that stands in the way. 3 to 3.5%. I mean, it really doesn't look like much, does it? But believe me, this small percentage represents a massive challenge that could put that entire 2047 vision at serious risk. So, what is this number? And how on earth can something that sounds so small threaten such a monumental goal? Well, that's the mystery we're going to unravel in this explainer, and we're using some fantastic insights from a deep dive by MK Research to do it.
The answer, it turns out, lies in something called the Great Credit Slowdown. You see, that mystery number we just saw, it isn't a growth rate, it's a gap, a shortfall. It's the missing fuel for India's entire economic engine. To put it really simply, hitting that 2047 target requires a certain amount of lending, of credit, flowing into the economy every single year. And right now, the banking sector is falling short by about 3 to 3.5% annually. This is the credit growth gap, and honestly, bridging it is the single biggest challenge they're facing.
So why is this gap even a thing? Well, it's kind of like a story with two sides. On one side, the big corporations, they're not asking banks for as much money because, frankly, they're finding it somewhere else. Then on the other side, the banks themselves are getting a lot more cautious, and they're actively shifting their focus away from corporations and towards someone else.
And this shift is just traumatic. I mean, look at this. Back in 2011, corporate loans made up almost 60% of all lending. By 2025, that's expected to drop to just 36%. So where did all that lending go? It's been redirected towards individuals, that's you and me, the retail customers, and to small and medium-sized businesses.
And here's the other side of that coin. The corporations haven't stopped needing money. They've just changed where they get it from. A decade ago, banks provided nearly 70% of their funding. Today, it's less than half. They're going directly to the markets now, raising money through things like bonds.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, technology is the obvious answer to all of this. And you know what? It is. But it's also a huge part of the problem. For Indian banks, tech is both a cure and a curse.
On one hand, the promise is absolutely incredible. AI can help banks make way smarter lending decisions and could automate up to 40% of the boring, low-value tasks. But the danger, the peril, is just as real. Digital fraud is absolutely surging, with criminals using really sophisticated methods like ID theft and organized crime syndicates. And this threat comes with another very specific and very alarming number, 4.2%. And this number represents a really worrying trend in who the fraudsters are going after. That 4.2%, that's the rate of fraud against existing bank customers. Just think about that for a second. For the first time ever, it's actually riskier to be an established, trusted customer than a brand new one. Criminals are specifically targeting people who already have a relationship with the bank, and that is a deeply, deeply worrying trend. So, on top of the credit gap and the massive fraud problem, Indian banks are facing another major headwind. And this is one that puts them completely at odds with pretty much the rest of the world. This quote from the research really sums it up perfectly. C/I, that just stands for the cost-to-income ratio. And for Indian banks, this ratio is going up, which means it's getting more expensive for them to operate. For banks almost everywhere else on the planet, it's going down. Yeah, the contrast here is just stark. While global banks are getting more efficient, leaner, Indian banks are actually getting more expensive to run. So, what is going on? What's driving this weird reversal? Well, it boils down to a few key things. First, their operating expenses are simply growing faster than their income. Employee costs are still high, but the real paradox, the real head-scratcher, is the IT spending. They are pouring money into technology, but the actual productivity gains have been tiny. We're talking about only 1% a year. So in short, they're paying for all the fancy tech without actually reaping the rewards. Okay, so we've got a credit gap, a fraud explosion, and rising costs. It sounds pretty grim, I know, but there is a path forward. The real question is, who's going to lead the charge?
And right now, we're seeing this fascinating split in the industry. The public sector banks, the PSBs, are actually stepping up and taking the lead on growth, and they're expected to keep that momentum going. The private banks, on the other hand, are being much more cautious. They're worried about risk, about profitability, so they're being super selective about where they choose to grow.
But look, regardless of who leads, the path forward isn't about small tweaks. It's about a total fundamental transformation. Step one has to be reimagining their core operations to unlock some real productivity. That means moving AI from just a little pilot project into the very heart of their business strategy. And maybe most critically, it means investing heavily in reskilling their people for a completely new digital reality. So let's just recap the big takeaways here. India has this monumental goal for 2047, but a 3.5% credit gap is the single biggest obstacle in its way. And to get past it, banks have to solve this triple challenge of rising costs, crazy technological disruption, and brand new fraud risks. This is not a problem that can just be managed or maintained. It demands a complete transformation. Which brings us all the way back to our final big question. The goal is set and the challenges are crystal clear. The clock is ticking towards 2047. Can India's banks truly transform themselves from the ground up? And can they do it fast enough to power this $30 trillion dream? The future of the nation's entire economy really depends on their answer.